Hey guys, this is GamerCal. Welcome to another Pokemon TCG discussion video. I've been enjoying doing a lot of these. I don't know how many are going to be done throughout all of the formats and whatnot, apart from just like rotation stuff. That's obviously pretty important to do, but I don't know how many of these sorts of ones are going to come in, because we have a bit of an important deck to speak about here. Matt naturally pulled two of this Feraligatr, has traded for a third one, and if we have seen anything about Matt in these like 10 parts or so far, it's that he plays the same deck every single round until it isn't a thing anymore. And this is the first round where his beloved Blastoise and sort of the old Dark Vileplume. Like, you could still play the old one, but you don't have the Snorlax at the moment, so probably not gonna see that. But like, his Blastoise is rotated, but he's been fiending for this, and yeah, if we've seen anything, we're gonna see this for the next 3 weeks. And he's pretty close to Jason's actual list here too, so it's a little bit on the scary side. So we're gonna talk about why this thing was the absolute Kingslayer of the Rocket on format, and what we could possibly do to stop it. Because it's a beast, it's really hard to do, but it is possible to stop this. So, what does it do? It's a 120 HP Pokemon. Its ability looks conflicting at first, like it discards water energy from your hand as often as you want during your turn. That seems really bad, right? You go minus, you're losing attachments, like what are you doing, right? But in addition to being just colossally difficult to take down, its Riptide attack shuffles all of those water energy back into the deck and then does 10 plus 10 for each one you shuffled in. It doesn't quite read that way, but we have confirmation that there has been an errata, or there was an errata in Japan, that we have been playing errata text on everything because it makes the format actually playable. You know, Slowking would still be a thing otherwise, and that is a very rude Pokemon. So yeah, we've been playing with the errata text as where possible, so if you can't shuffle any water energy into your deck, where, you know, it just doesn't work. You only do 10 damage, and we will see that in one of the counters to this thing. But yeah, it's modular damage. If you play enough water energy in the deck, you can do so much damage. Like, you can do any amount of damage that you need to. So I have hit for like 140 on this thing before. It's kind of stupid. It only takes 3 energy too. It's like not even like a 4 energy thing like Typhlosion would be. Nah, it's just 3 energy on the Feraligatr. It's absolutely absurd. And of course, 120 HP is insanely difficult to KO as well. Factoring Goldberry as a potential thing here, and it's just, ugh. This thing is an absolute unit and a half. It's probably going to take about 3-4 prizes by itself until you can finally get it down. Yeah, it's ridiculous. But it isn't just the Gator. The Croconaw, you could actually probably read it without me zooming in, but the Croconaw is equally bad. Like, 80 HP is pretty respectable. Like, this is on the high end, it's on the Charmeleon side. This whole line is on the Charmeleon side, because Totodil's 50, the Charmeleon was 80 as this is, and then the Gator is the same as the Zard, it's at 120. It's insane. 2 energy tackle, 20 damage is not spectacular, but Sweep Away is a perfectly fine attack to have, and a good backup for Riptide when you can't do a lot of damage with it for whatever reason. 3 energy, 50 damage, discard top 3 for any deck. Those 3 might end up being waters that you can then use with Riptide next turn. It's pretty crazy. Totodile isn't too spectacular, but it's still fine for an evolving Pokemon. Right, Fury Spikes or 1 energy could potentially do enough damage to kill a baby if you're super lucky. Lear's not very good because there's so much zero retreat going on, but it's got 50 HP, so it's better than the other one. The other one does have Rage, so if you're using one of the techs I'll discuss, you might still play it. I don't know, overall all of this line is incredibly solid, and it's just really hard to deal with. Like, you've got to do so much damage to it, and it can one-shot any attacker that it chooses to. So clearly this thing is going to be pretty absurd. It's also weak to grass instead of lightning, which is unusual for water types. Right, you've got the Poliwag line, and then you tend to have the Quagsire and stuff like that that's weak to grass. Gyarados, for some reason, still never worked that one out, but whatever. Yeah, it's not the most common weakness, and we did just lose Siphon, so we lost our best splashable grass type. So yeah, it's hard to hit around. So I want to take a quick look at Jason's deck here before I go into what I expect Matt is going to play, and then after that we'll look at what techs could we put into the deck, what sort of surprises we might see, and then how do we beat it, because there are a few ways of doing that. So Jason's list here is very straightforward. You don't really pair this with any other attacker, to be honest, because it has an inbuilt secondary attacker in the Croconaw. So it's just a straightforward 4-4-3 for the Gator, 3 Cleffa, 1 Magby. The Magby is really handy for if you need to disable powers, such as Typhlosion potentially, or even Meganium. Like, there's a few, even Forretress is one that you could want to disable. So it's just handy to have around. Also chips at opponents' focus bands, like if they survive with a band and then KO Gator, this thing can chip at them whilst you charge up another Gator. So definitely good. And then it's just like maxed out the double gust. Misty's Wrath is insane in this deck. We lost Professor Oak, but this lets you go 7 cards deep as well. You only take 2 cards off of that and then you discard the rest. But given that Riptide puts a ton of energy back into the deck and you want to discard the energy anyway, very, very powerful. 1 Garbage Run because you do need to recover pieces sometimes. Professor Elm is our best draw card in this format, so every deck is going to max out. Secret Mission is a weird card for this deck. It's got a couple of different things. You look at the opponent's hand, so I guess you can see what they might plan next turn, and then discard as many cards from your own hand as you want to draw that many. So you discard the water energy with this instead of Riptide, you get to draw cards as well as, or not Riptide, Downpour, the ability, right? You discard them with this instead and you get to draw for it, so that's really good. Rocket's Training Gym gives both actives 1 more retreat cost, so you use this to make your baby Pokemon have a retreat so that you can do additional damage with the Riptide. Focus Band obviously is insane on any Pokemon, but it's especially good on something that's as hard to KO as Feraligatr. 120 HP is just ridiculous, right? So having to do that much in the first place is a challenge. Having then the chance to survive and just get another one-shot next turn, absolutely ludicrous. So Jason's list maxes out on this, and then the card that really brings this list together is Trash Exchange. So Riptide shuffles a ton of waters back into the deck, and then you've got to get them back in the discard again next turn, right? We don't have Professor Oak, so if you run out of Misty's Wrath and stuff like that, it's going to be pretty hard to do. Trash Exchange effectively resets your discard pile by shuffling in everything that's there and then milling the same number of cards that was in the discard pile to the discard. And then you discard this afterwards, because trainers do not go into the discard until their effects are resolved. What this means is that if you shuffle in, say, 8 water energy, you're left with maybe 20-30 cards at most in your discard, depends how late the game has gone. You Trash Exchange, and then you probably end up with about 7 or 8 energy back in the discard, and you can do it again. And you might not even need all your draw options to go from there. So yeah, if you have a Trash Exchange in hand, you are probably attacking for big damage that turn as well. 18 water energy rounds out the list. So, what does Matt not have in this list? He doesn't have Magby, so he's probably going to use Igglybuff instead. This is not as good, but if he doesn't play it, then some of our counterattacks become basically impossible for the deck to beat. So I'm pretty sure he will play this. I think he played it in the Blastoise list last week, so should get played here. Targeted disabling of a bench power is perfectly reasonable. He does not have 4 of the good Croconaw, so we have to use this one instead if you want the full 4 line here. This card is fine. Like, 2 watercolorless 30 prevents the opponent from being able to retreat at all next turn, which is interesting. Unless they evolve, they can't get out. So that's kind of okay, but generally nowhere near as good as just doing a flat 50, right? Screech is also potentially interesting, being able to set them up, but again, if they switch or gust themselves out and whatnot, the effect goes away, so not super good. We're missing one of the trash exchange. There's not really any way of replacing that effect. We're missing one elm, so that could hurt the consistency a little bit. Hasn't really done so in testing, but you know, it's still there. We're missing the Rockets training gym entirely, so I reckon Narrow Gym is probably going to get played instead. This is a tech space, to be honest. You don't have to play the stadium here, but this deck does kind of live and die by resolving trash exchange, so Chaos Gym would be a really big problem, so I think you still play the counter stadium. And then we don't have the 4 focus bands, so Goldberry makes sense here. Actually, I think Matt does have 3 of these, so I think this is correct, but if he only has 2, then there's another space opened up. Because of the Elm and the Trash Exchange missing, Good Manners, I think, is the most likely card to come in here. He does have 2 of it. This deck only plays like 8 basics by default, so being able to just get another basic out of the deck, specifically getting Clever, is obviously very powerful, right? So I reckon this comes in. Speaking on Clever, none of us have got more than 2, so we'll probably see the draw 2-1 come in as well. It's better than nothing, to be honest. So this is the 60 that I expect to see, but there are some techs, and there are a couple of techs I know he has that I think really should come in here. A second Igglybuff is pretty important, because apart from just prizing the first one of the counters that we have for this thing, if we have 2 of it out, then it still just completely shuts the deck down. So you might need to bench a second Igglybuff. It's not as if you need the bench spaces for other Totodiles and stuff like that. You usually don't set more than 1 up at a time, so this would be fine. Suicune is a really good tech, I think. It's not weak to grass, which is the main thing. It does decent enough damage to beat out a lot of the checks, and it's very debilitating too. But 75% chance of like stunning the opponent in some way. Sleep is only a 50 after that, but still, like 2 heads paralysis, 1 head's sleep out of 2 coins, that's fine. And its ability is really good because it stops anything that isn't damaged from working on the Suicune. A lot of the checks will be able to debilitate Pokemon by like discarding energy, paralyzing them, putting them to sleep, etc. So this is a pretty good out to that. Energy flow is potentially a tech here, just to return excess energy on the Cleffers and stuff like that. When we don't have Rocket's training gym to do that, we may want to use something like this instead, because then you can discard them from the hand with Downpour, go from there. If you want more draw, I know he's got like basically a full play set of Erica, so that could be a thing. Maybe not, because you do give the opponent draws as well, but it doesn't really matter if you're killing them every turn, probably not. Good gas attack. This would stop the opponent from having their lockdown floodgate type powers on you, so you could use this. You can always just downpour and then play Goop Gas, so that's fine. Max Revive, you are playing 18 energy cards in here, so you may be able to tech this in, get a basic straight back from the discard. It's not too bad. Pokemon Breeder Fields, probably not too useful in this deck, but it's still something that could help search evolution cards. I think the draw power does it fine, but you could still do it anyway. Recall, I don't think he has this, but it's a really good card to use on the Gator so you don't have to Riptide. If your Riptide is not possible because of Disruption Tech, or if you just don't have the energy, you can Recall Sweep Away and use that attack instead, so that's really good. And then Sabrina's Gaze, potentially, once you've done a Riptide and you've got a ton of energy in the deck, this might be another way that you can shuffle up and draw a bunch of energy so you can downpour Riptide again. Not the greatest card, it's definitely not as good as Elm and stuff, but I could see it being placed in as like the 4th copy, if you will. So these are most of the techs I can see. There are probably others, but these are the best ones. Definitely the Suicune and the Igglybuff should go in. The rest are down to preference. So, how do we beat this thing? Well, there's kind of 4 categories of stuff that we can use here. There's the staple cards at the top, there's the grass types. This is not an exhaustive list of all the grass types we could use, but this is the general setup that we could see. There are the cards that might just beat it through power anyway, and yes, this does include some fire types that are strong enough. And then there's the disruption tag, because this deck is, especially trainer disruption, is pretty potent against this deck, because if you can shut them off of their power to just like refresh their hand every turn, shut them off of that critical trash exchange, you might just win the game. Keep in mind, they're shuffling like 10 water energy back into the deck on every successful attack, so their deck is going to be like mostly energy, and if you can shuffle their trainers back, they probably won't have the gas to attack turn after turn. So trainer disruption especially is very powerful. So what are our staples? Parasect is the big staple here. Now initially this reads as if it is support for Feraligatr, but because of the errata it actually isn't. As long as Parasect is in play, any card in a player's discard cannot be affected by attacks or powers. This means that Riptide cannot shuffle energy back into the deck, and under the errata this means that it doesn't do additional damage, so you will only do 10 damage a time. This completely shuts down Riptide, and is the reason why Igglybuff is such an important tech for the deck. Magby would be the other way to potentially disable this for a turn, but then you're leaving yourself open to the next staple, which is Double Gust. So Double Gust is really good in like every deck basically. It's very good for the Gator, but it's also very good against the Gator, because if you can Double Gust them before they get to Feraligatr and knock them out as like a Croconaw or even the Totodile, you're probably in a pretty good spot. It's hard for the deck to set up multiple basics at the same time, especially considering that Double Gust doesn't work very well for them if they have any other Totodile line up. So if you can disrupt them quick enough, like take quick knockouts with some of these guys, probably in an okay spot. And then Focus Band is the other obvious one. Yes, they can just Riptide for 10 and take you out next turn, but you get one extra turn of attacking them. For something with 120 HP, this is definitely good to whittle them down, right? As far as the grass stuff goes, the best ones are the ones listed here. I think Box Golbat is okay, like it's a little bit on the weaker side, but it does do 40 for any 1 energy. You can splash this into any deck and have at least something that can pressure the Crocs, so I think it's decent at the very least. Crobat was the thing historically used to try and beat Feraligatr, but I think it didn't work in the long run. Maybe people didn't tech enough against it, but Cross Attack is interesting, and the entire deck is Zero Retreat, right? Cross Attack is basically Pin Missile from Jolteon or Comet Punch from Kangaskhan, except if you get 2 or more heads, you also confuse the opponent. So that is incredibly debilitating, to be honest. It's good against a lot of decks, but Gator especially, 3 heads just one-shots it. So, you know, it's got some potential. Erica's Victreebel is really good. You've also got the ability to gust out the Gators that are getting charged up if you need to. It doesn't quite one-shot, unfortunately. It does 100, but it's still very powerful. The lower stages are also very good, so you can do a ton of damage with this thing and actually just get the kill quickly, or just like gust around it if you need to. Dark Muck is the economy version of like taking stuff out here. This card is maybe a little bit underrated, to be honest. 2 grass is a little expensive for its attack, but like 20 and auto poison is pretty powerful. Like that KOs baby Pokemon even with a Focus Band attached. It also does 40 plus the poison to the Gator line, so that one-shots Totodile, it 2-shots the other 2 when you factor in poison damage, so it's pretty powerful, to be honest. You do kind of need them to stay active for that though, so I don't know, but its ability is also really good, because like you just stop the opponent from being able to actually retreat. Igglybuff can't touch this either because it's in the active, so very powerful effect on that too. The Dark Wheezing, especially with Metal Energy, is a really funny one. You probably need the Ninetales, like Brock's Ninetales, to transform into other Wheezing and stuff for this, but you can do potentially 120 damage with this, like, very easily, even without weakness, but especially with it, dead easy to do. And if you use either Transparent Walls or Metal Energy, you can reduce the damage that you do to your bench. Brock would then heal it if you want to as well, so pretty good. Meganium just gives your grass Pokemon double grass energy attachments, so you can attack for much cheaper with this thing. 2 energy effectively doing 80 to Gator is pretty good as well, so that's not too bad. And then Heracross, even if you don't have Final Blow, yes, it's on a coin toss, but this would probably be pegged with the Meganium to cut the cost down by 1. It one-shots a Feraligatr anyway, even if they don't get you down to low HP, so definitely worth a consideration. As far as the stuff that outpowers it, well, outpower is maybe not quite correct, but the stuff that can compete with it in power at least. Dark Blastoise is really good. Dark Pokemon in general are quite nice because Darkness Energy can amplify their damage output, but mostly Dark Blastoise's Hydro Cannon is the main like competitor here. 4 energy, 70 damage is quite good, but Rocket Tackle, if you do play Dark Energy, is quite nice. Like, yeah, it does a little bit to itself, but you might be able to stop damage next turn, so you get a free turn against them, and that could be all it takes. Especially if you force them to like double gust around, you probably don't even get Blastoise hit at that point. Dark Golduck with a Darkness Energy attached will do 60, and the Psyduck is part of the Disruption package, so like 2-shot is pretty nice. Blaine's Arcanine, if you could charge it up with the Typhlosion, will one-shot the Feraligatr and anything else in the game for that matter. 120 damage is the highest that we need at the moment, so that's obviously good. Politoed with Frog Song, the Poliwhirl is energy acceleration, so you'll be able to get this charged up quicker than normal, and this thing can do 40 extra damage on its attacks, so in theory, flip 2 heads, do 120, pretty good. Surge's Electabuzz charges itself up and then does a massive hit in one go. You probably need to hit them as a Croconaw for this, but 3 heads on a Croc will take it down, so that's pretty solid if you get enough energy out. Same with Kabutops, is like 40 times, so you need 2 heads on a Croconaw, but this thing can still like swarm itself out because of the Kabuto, so it's pretty powerful in its own right. Rocket Zapdos just does a lot of damage, and it puts a fair bit of pressure on because of the attaching from discard. You generally need Metal Energy on this thing to make it work though, so not super viable in draft, but still a good option. The Typhlosions, especially the Flame Wheel one, is pretty nice if you can get heads on the Fire Boost, just because this can one-shot the Croconaw. But this Typhlosion also can one-shot Croconaw if you flip heads, so, you know, good times to be had there. The Entei Macago, like, you wouldn't think this would actually work, because it is weak towards it, and trust me, it's not a, like, favorable matchup, but it actually can compete. Entei mills the top 5 cards of your deck when you play it. You get all fire energy from there, attach them to any of your fire Pokemon, and then end the turn. So you're charging up for a gigantic lava flow on the Macago, who can discard any number of energy that you want, fire energy that is, and do 40 plus 20 for each one you discard. So this actually can match the one-shot potential, you just need to discard a lot of energy to do it. But still, again, the idea is you catch them at the Croconaw phase, because it does take 3 turns for them to get to Gator. So if you can double gust them, catch them at the Croc phase, you only have to discard 2 fire, and you can actually survive anything that isn't Sweep Away from the Croconaw, so that's pretty good. Donphan, mostly in conjunction with the Forretress down here, can be very disruptive, very hard to hit, and that generally will do enough damage. Like 50 at a time doesn't seem like too much to a 120 HP Pokemon, but they have to double gust the Donphan in order to get it back active, right? And if they do that, you incur spikes damage as well, right? Like they get 2 Forretress in play and you are basically doing 70 when they bring the Feraligatr back in. Both of these guys have got Rapid Spin, so it forces the opponent to switch out. And again, Gator doesn't generally charge up multiple attackers at the same time. so you're going to chip them as they come back in and do respectable damage with a rapid spin as it is, so pretty good. And Tyranitar may be the most suspect one on here, but if it plays Darkness Energy, then you can do like 2 shots to the Gator and the active, and also potentially squish all of their baby Pokemon on the bench. They don't play high HP Pokemon, like tanking on the bench, right? So this might be enough. Now as far as disruption stuff goes, it's sort of broadly categorized into like energy disruption with the Charmander, the Vaporeon, and Koga's Muck. These are a little bit tricky to do, but if you can catch them before they get free energy on the Gator, then you can shut them off of being able to actually attack with Feraligatr, and that's good enough, to be honest. Your trainer disruption is very important here. Dark Vileplume will obviously have a strong matchup if you're actually attacking with the Plume, which is rare admittedly, but is definitely possible. Psyduck will stop them playing trainers in the early game, makes it very difficult to set up. The only problem with Psyduck is that it doesn't do well against baby Pokemon, because you gotta flip the heads for it first, so a little bit awkward. The Noctowl and potentially even Surge's Jolteon, you gotta flip heads with both of these, but Surge's Jolteon just shuts off trainers just like the Psyduck, but with some damage attached, and the Noctowl is akin to Rocket Sneak Attack, which is another fantastic way of stunning them as they go. If they take a big knockout, again their deck is going to be much bigger. You shuffle their biggest trainer, the Trash Exchange, back into the deck. It's going to be hard for them to recover from that and attack in consecutive turns, and that might be just the time that you need. Postero's Revenge is a very similar thing here alongside the Rocket's Trap. These will just stun the opponent's hand down, especially again. It's risky because you might just draw them into like 4 energy that they can discard and do 50, but if that's not enough damage to kill you, then who cares, right? And the Rocket's Trap might just stun them out of everything, to be honest. Murkrow is an interesting one. If you can lock in a... well, there's a few things, actually. If you can lock in a baby Pokemon that can't attack, then they have to draw Double Gust or they die, right? But depending on the situation, if you have the Smeargle to like paint and change the Feraligatr to a Psychic type, you might actually be able to lock in a Feraligatr, and Riptide might not be able to do enough damage. So yeah, I maybe should have put Smeargle in here too, but yeah, Mean Look is pretty nasty, so that's cool too. And then the last ones, these are a little bit more experimental. Dark Machamp is mostly it takes free energy to actually get a Feraligatr going, so if you can shuffle it back into the deck, then yeah, you don't take a prize for that, but they've got to set up a whole new Gator, and that could be good enough, but it's just really hard to get this thing going, you know? 4 energy is a big ask, but could be good. And then the Vileplume here, I think this is more disruption than attacking, because if they do damage to you whilst it's you're active, you flip and they get confused if you flip heads. So kind of like the Muck, it's a bit more disruption that way. And yeah, its attack is fine, it 2-shots the Gator, but 80 damage is not especially difficult for them to reach, so you would need Focus Band to make this worthwhile. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Like, you've got your staple tech in Parasect, you could run a Grass deck if you want to directly counter it, which I know is definitely in the consideration for a couple of people. You could try to overpower it, especially at the Crocodile phase, by going with some of these guys, or you can play the Disruption game. You can blend these as well, like Dark Muck would probably play very well with the Disruption game to really shut it down. Like, I haven't quite built it yet, but Dark Muck Noctowl seems like it would just completely dumpster Feraligatr. Obviously, Parasect can get teched with a ton of stuff. I'm playing it in Kingdra, for example, because the Kingdra doesn't need water energy to do its recall attack, so I can actually play Grass and attack with Parasect. So yeah, there's a bunch of ways that we can combine these cards as well. So that helps because I don't have most of them. You know, I don't have the plumes, I don't have the muck, I don't have playable Jolteon, I don't have the Fortress or the Chaos Gym, so kind of gonna make some stuff work here. But I think we should be okay, because we're preparing, and that's the main thing. Thank you guys very much for watching, hopefully you have enjoyed yourselves, learned something about Feraligatr over here. This deck is incredibly scary. If you haven't seen any of the stream stuff that we've been doing, you should, because we've played this deck and it is real nasty. So yeah, till next time though, take care.